Let's get some analysis now. I'm joined by Liberal Senator, former Ambassador to Israel, Dave Sharma. Dave, thank you as always. How damaging is this for Benjamin Netanyahu to lose the solidarity, the unity of having Benny Gantz alongside him?
Well, it's a significant loss, Kieran. It's not going to bring down his government anytime soon. Netanyahu's coalition still controls a majority of seats in Israel's parliament, the Knesset, but Benny Gantz is a well-respected former chief of staff of the Israeli Defence Forces, and particularly to the outside world, he was one of the more diplomatically acceptable interlocutors in Israel. Netanyahu's cabinet has a number of far-right ministers that have plans and intentions that are completely at odds with the wishes of the international community, whereas Gantz has been a mainstream figure. And what it ultimately does is it pulls Netanyahu's government, I think, further towards the right, towards where the ideological base is, and that's going to make things difficult, not only for the post-war planning for Gaza, but in terms of some of the international diplomatic opportunities that are out there, including normalisation with Saudi Arabia potentially.
The polling also shows that when it does come to election day, when the dust settles to an extent, you've got a Prime Minister who is well and truly facing a defeat because of the accountability that will finally rest upon his shoulders for what happened in allowing October 7 to happen in the first place.
Look, undoubtedly there will have to be some accountability for that. Obviously, Netanyahu's political interests sort of push back that date of accountability as far as possible. He doesn't face elections anytime soon. The only thing that could force early elections is if a number of his members of his own coalition withdraw and, support a motion of no confidence, which would force early elections. But absent that, he still has a considerable time until elections are due to be held in Israel. But and his intent, obviously, is to try and rehabilitate his image and his reputation through the successful conduct and prosecution of this war. But undoubtedly, Israel's sense of security has taken a huge blow as a result of the 7th of October, and it happened on Benjamin Netanyahu's watch.
It did indeed, and it's been a weekend of mixed news, really, for Israel. You've got this split in the war cabinet, but just days before, the rescue of 4 hostages, which was of huge significance and relief for so many there.
It was a moment of huge national relief and just joy, really. These 4 hostages who were all taken from the Nova Music Festival, which was the music festival where a lot of young people were celebrating before Hamas came in and kidnapped and murdered hundreds of them. So these 4 have been released. They had been taken at the Nova Music Festival. They've been held now for something like 250 days. It's immense relief to firstly have them alive, secondly have them back and seemingly in reasonable health. But I think it shows you the challenge. I mean, there's still about 120 Israeli hostages that remain unaccounted for and that are in Gaza. What their status is unknown. And Israel has not, this is the first hostages that have been released since that early hostage deal, which was now several months ago, and that has been causing growing frustration, not only amongst the family members of the hostages, as you'd expect, but really across Israel's political spectrum, that one of the intended aims of the military campaign to secure the release of the hostages has been so slow to bear fruit.
Indeed. And finally, as a former diplomat yourself and foreign affairs expert, would Australia see a catastrophic impact on our relations in the Pacific if we were to backslide on our 2030 climate targets? That's the argument the Prime Minister's made today.
Well, I think where we'll see the damage is if we set targets and we don't meet them, and that's what this Labor government is almost certainly going to do. I mean, if you look at emissions in Australia, when Labor came to office, they were about 108 million tonnes of CO2 equivalent per quarter. Well, last quarter, they were exactly the same, 108 million tonnes CO2 equivalent. Emissions are not coming down under this government. They've set a target of 43% reduction in emissions by 2030. They've set a target of 82% of renewable energy by 2030. Neither of those targets are likely to be met, and that will do a huge amount of damage to our credibility because People expect in
They're adamant
international
they will meet
relations
them.
when you make commitments, you meet them. Well, I just don't see how that's going to happen. I mean, they haven't moved under 2 years. I don't think anyone in industry or think tanks or academia thinks the government is able to, certainly not 82% renewable energy. But the onus is on them to show how they can. I mean, they're shunning nuclear. They've got an aversion to gas. All these transition fuels which will help you on the pathway and smooth the pathway to lower emissions intensity energy, the government is shunning, and the sort of policies they're pursuing are, wildly out of touch with the economic realities Australia faces.
Dave Sharma, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Kieran.